As teachers, we've all been faced with the challenge of providing our learners with good, clear answers to their language questions. I personally have found myself in awkward moments where my learners sat quietly waiting for an answer to a question that I didn't quite have an answer for, or might have been asking myself this very same question that was now being proposed by my learners. Honestly, although we are language teachers, we can't expect to have an answer to every question our students propose. After all, we didn't actually invent the English language. Well, today, my presentation will feature the research of one teacher's use of task-based learning in his classroom. Hopefully, by the end, you will have another method you can use to face those inquiry learners of yours. In Chapter 4 of Teachers Exploring Tasks, Raymond Sheehan describes how he used a concordance activity to help students find answers to a specific language question. His students, just like many of ours, were depending on their teacher and reference books to answer their questions relating to language. So, Mr. Sheehan decided to take action by implementing an activity in his class where students would find their answers to a specific language question by analyzing and exploring concordance samples. First, I'll briefly give an overview of Sheehan's research and explain how he conducted the concordance activity. Then I'll explain how his research reflects task-based learning and how this kind of task can help our students find answers to their language inquiries. Okay, let's start with some background information. Sheehan used his own classroom as his research context, which consisted of a group of intermediate level students from UAE studying business. His method involved first establishing a research question, which at the time was related to the precise meaning of the word do, which his learners had questions about concerning the word's meaning and use. Sheehan used a corpus concordance sampler as his research source, a form of data-driven learning. Next, let me briefly summarize the concordance activity that Sheehan used with his students to analyze the word do. Okay, here's the task. First, in the pre-task, the teacher gives the students a sample concordance for the specific word along with questions to help students notice features of layout and language. Then, in the task phase, the learners analyze a sample of real language surrounding the specific word, while the teacher facilitates by asking quantitative and interpretative questions, such as, how many lines in the concordance is do connected to the word time? Label the lines T. For this phase, students can also be given different samples and asked to compare their findings. Next, in the planning phase, the learners in groups prepare a report on what they've discovered about the specific word, using a teacher-prepared data sheet or even their own notes. During this phase, the teacher is an observer, noticing and taking notes on the learners' language interactions or exchanges. The final phase involves the learners reporting on their findings and or comparing their findings to other learners. Also, a post-task phase could involve the learners compiling all their findings into one summary report. Okay, now let's see what Sheehan's learners found out about the word do as a result of completing this activity. Okay, first, do to occurs in about 25 to 40 instances. Do for is usually followed by a noun or a noun phrase. Do at refers to a place. To give him his due is a fixed phrase. Do and to is sometimes separable. Many do to phrases could be labeled either cause or time. 9 out of 26 are cause and the remaining are time. 10 out of 26 times do to occurs with active verbs and 6 times with passive verbs. Now, here's what Sheehan discovered about his learners as a result of his research. First, his learners had mixed reactions or feelings to the task itself. And although his learners were familiar with the type of task framework and with the concept of research, their perceptions of the task cycle were different from previous exposures. Sheehan assumed that this was the case because they had never used a task framework to evaluate or analyze language itself. The students also weren't used to the layout of a concordance and were intimidated by the length and density of the text. Sheehan also learned that a concordance analysis activity should be viewed not as a replacement of familiar methods, but as an extra option to answer questions about language. Shehan's research sheds light on how teachers can use task-based learning to help their learners find answers to their own language questions while being exposed to the language itself. Personally, I would have never thought task-based learning could be used to explore and investigate language. However, seeing the success Shehan had with his students inspires me to use this approach in my classroom, especially when students are curious and motivated to find answers. I would recommend teachers use concordance tasks for helping learners investigate language while being involved in the language process for the purpose of finding answers. By doing so, they would not only find answers to their language inquiries, but will broaden their perception of language in the process of being involved in the use of it.